All right, from the frosty shores of the North Saskatchewan River right here in scenic Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, this is Jack Antonio of Do You Know Jack, the podcast, and on the line with me today, Stephen McBean, evil genius behind one of my favorite bands, Black Mountain. How you doing, man?
I'm pretty good. Sitting here, putting my feet up on, using my Marshall as a footrest for now, and going back to some heavy riffing after that.
Are you like a guy that's just sort of always writing then?
Always a little bit. I usually like write a riff here or there. Sometimes I sit down and try to write a whole song. Maybe a little bit lazier as I get older, but when it comes time to record, I usually have like a bunch of garbage cans full of ideas to sort through.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You know what? It reminded me of, how the guitar players in Metalocalypse are always noodling. They just noodle constantly. I'm picturing Stephen McBean doing the same thing.
I do a lot of noodling. Noodle around, make some spaghetti, go back to more guitar noodling.
From one noodle to the next. Well, listen, man. The reason why I'm calling, obviously, is because Destroyer is about to drop May 24th, and before I hit record, of course, we were trying to figure out when we last talked, and it was definitely before a lot of major changes in the band have occurred. I think, right? I mean, a couple of new members have come your way, and a couple of the older ones have said goodbye.
Yeah, we definitely went through a, what do you call it, a spring cleaning or whatnot.
Yeah.
We did four, made the four record. We toured that for, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years. And then Josh retired his BMA jacket. And then shortly after that, Amber, I guess, chose to follow suit. And then me and Jeremy kind of stood around for a few minutes and perplexed in what we should do, and we decided that we wanted to still continue, and then we set out on the course of actually how about continuing with those major changes, and it was it was a daunting period. There was lots of ups and downs.
Yeah.
I like jammed with like a million people. All that was fun, and then certain things were nice. The label Jaguar was, they wanted us to continue. We didn't do it for that reason, but it was nice to have them in our court. And then we figured the best plan is that we'd start making a record, much like the first Black Mountain record, where it was recorded in a jam space. So I set up a bunch of recording stuff in the jam room, set up some drums, guitars, amps, all that, mic'd them all up, and
Yeah. Yeah.
over the course of like a few months, I had friends come over that we had, met on the road on the years of touring, like Cliff, who used to play in the Flaming Lips, and Kid Millions from Oneida, some new cats, Adam, that I met, who used to play in White Hills, and then he
Right.
plays in a
Right.
band called Dom and Gang, and ended up recording it was like about like 22 songs, and then kind of waded through those a bit, did some more stuff on them. Then I sent like kind of picked a bunch and I sent them up to Jeremy, and he added some synths on them, and we kept working on it. And like I said, we didn't, we weren't sure if it was going to be something new or if it was going to be a Pink Mountaintops record, but
Yeah. Of course.
the more we added to it, the more it just, you know, sounded, it harbored the spirit of Black Mountain. And then the last, near the end of the record, we set like a mix date with John Congleton.
Uh huh.
He had mixed in the future. So we kind of set a mixed date to like give us like a deadline. And then just a little bit before that, I ran into my friend Rachel, who used to play in Sleepy Sun and other bands. She'd played with me in Pink Mountaintops a few times, and I played her some stuff, and she sang on some tracks. And then, we basically decided, okay, this sounds like Black Mountain 2019. So we mixed it, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and off we go,
Yeah.
And it was just so much. All the material was much in the much more in the vein of Black Mountain and Pink Mountaintops, and it was like that thing where a part of it in this day and age, it's like Black Mountain's kind of the vehicle to get the rock music out, and
Yeah.
you know, as long as it's fresh and it still has the heart, sometimes some people lose their spirit and want to move on, and that's cool. And so we just, I don't know. I also decided too that rather try to make a new record and have it flop than just kind of throwing in the towel. I'm not much of a quitter. I like a good challenge.
Yeah, of course, of course. You know what I was thinking is, as you guys were wading through the material, I mean, just in general, and I know maybe a lot of rock musicians are hesitant to compartmentalize, but I know words have come up like it's in the spirit of Black Mountain. So I mean, what was it about Destroyer that was in the spirit of Black Mountain? Because I mean, I know the space rock thing is evident, but I've always thought of you guys as a lot more than that. You're very multi-layered. I mean, is that it? Is that what makes it Black Mountain?
I think there's a vastness to it's certain epicness, I guess you could say. There's definitely a thing where if there's like monolithic riffs and some Tangerine Dream keyboards, some John Carpenter vibes, or I mean it's the kind of thing it can kind of we kind of have a pretty open. I hate to use the term musical palette to paint on a musical canvas, but there's some folk stuff and there's some psychedelic stuff and there's some hard rock stuff and some bit of metal stuff. And I mean, for this record, once, a bunch of it was recorded, we kind of decided we also wanted to make a lean and mean record that was,
Yeah.
there's not really any ballads on this record. There's some somber moments, but just a single record, and is also the first record I've ever made in my life since I've been a licensed driver.
That's
So
true. Yeah,
that
that's a big
actually
part of it.
yeah, it influenced a fair bit where I would do a rough mix and then I would, take the rough mix out and cruise around listening to it, and I've never actually been able to do that before without a driver. So it was cool, and it was a different. Before I would put things on a Walkman and walk around and listen to it, or
Yeah.
but this was a different way to experience it, and was I think it definitely brought out a bit of the cruising rock, and the drive of this record actually comes from, like I say, my life experience of now being an accomplished driver.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't help as I listened to, especially the first two or three tracks on Destroyer. This is some pretty heavy shit you're cranking out, heavier maybe than Four ever could have hoped or dreamed to be. Is part of that just in the lineup changes and also in the the license to drive mentality that you have now? You think?
There's a bit of that. And I guess it's maybe like, once we were over the heavy bummer of people leaving the group, then we kind of switched helmets and put on like these kind of, okay, well, this, instead of thinking of this as closed doors, let's think of this as like opening up a whole thing of playing with people that are like fresh and new, and new blood and stuff. And I mean, Josh is an amazing musician, and Cliff is an amazing musician, and but yeah, they play differently, and Cliff definitely has like a bit of a wild animal on the drums, and we definitely bonded on a lot of, we grew up on like a lot of stuff, like I mean everything from the Melvins to Slayer in the '80s to
Yeah.
Kiss, all
Yeah.
these things, and we really hit it off well with that. And Adam, who plays drums on some of the songs, he's a young long hair, super excited. So there's definitely an added heaviness from that. Also, too, probably just like the having the scope of like narrowing. Like Jeremy was like the sole, you know, synth contributor, whereas before Josh would do synths and Jeremy would do synths. So it's maybe like a little more focused. There's like maybe less of that, and there's maybe a bit more. I really experimented with this record too, of trying to get some really nasty guitar sounds, and I guess just the benefit of working in your own studio is that you can spend a whole day or a whole week like just finding some really certain vibe you're going for, and there's no one looking at the clock or anything. So that was liberating.
Yeah.
I don't know, and also I guess that thing of just I don't know. I guess maybe before there was different moments. I mean, there was also some more ballady stuff that we recorded, maybe some stuff that was a bit more Stonesy, or but for this one we just kind of went with the drivers.
Yeah. You know what, this made me think about, just it made me think of the first time I heard something maybe obscure by Sabbath, like like the Born Again record, which a lot of people want to critically malign, but I've often felt that record kind of had a vibe that other Sabbath stuff didn't, that was kind of interesting and fresh. Or even thinking about Rick Wakeman's keys on the song "Who Are You" on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. Like if we were to add guitars to that, or I got this vibe as I was listening. It brought me back to the first time I saw the original heavy metal cartoon. There was just so much to this, but then at the same time, there's a bit of '90s in there too. Like it made me think of like. There's a bit of an Alice in Chains vibe almost on a few of the tracks too. But I know like you probably come from the grunge era to a certain extent, right? I think we're both from the same
Yeah, a
generation.
little bit. I saw like a lot of those bands in Victoria when they first came out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, Black Sabbath, Born Again. Like when I heard that when I guess I would have been like 13 or 14 when it came out. I mean, at that time, it's like I never like they were just these bands, so I wasn't even aware that like you know that was the Deep Purple singer. It was just another Black Sabbath record. And I was like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
cool. Like, and yeah, I love that record. Zero the Hero and Trashed and I mean Digital Bitch. Those are killer songs. I like the Dio era too. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean it's interesting to look back how those bands. I've also been digging in a lot to like Never Say Die and like Technical Ecstasy. Those ones
yeah. There's a bit of a
lately
Johnny
too.
Blade vibe too on some of the tracks on Destroyer for sure.
Right on.
I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's a rock journalist's, it's a habit of rock journalists to try and figure out a sound. But I mean, I just love Black Mountain in general. I love everything you guys do. So it's cool to kind of analyze and go, oh, how did he come up with that? I mean, why do you do what you do, Stephen? I mean, how did you get into things, and what steered you in the direction of sort of psychedelic stoner sludge doom space rock?
I don't know. It was like I just I got into like I think like when I was really young. I think my parents got me like maybe an ABBA record and a Bay City Rollers record. That was literally when I was like 5 or 6, and then I got in. I got a kit. I think it was actually Kiss Destroyer. Someone gave me that for my birthday when I was like I don't know 7, and that was just like a wow, like listening to that, looking at the cover, and then kind of the stereotypical thing, like me and my friends had a band where we would get our tennis rackets and buckets and we would play along to Kiss records, and then I eventually got an electric guitar and started a band with my best friends when we were little kids, and we played punk shows, and then other like mid 80s, late 80s, we kind of, I guess we were like the perfect age for when like thrash metal and crossover came along, because it was like going from like a punk hardcore kid and then hearing like Metallica Kill 'Em All or COC or Venom, or it was the perfect stepping stone for also like, I guess, upping your instrument prowess, like
Yeah,
learning to
yeah.
do the riff, like the palm muting and stuff. And it was like we were all just the right age, to play. Like our band, we played with bands like The Accused and you know Death Sentence, and yeah, it was just the natural progression for us was to like kind of get into the thrash metal and the heavy metal. And at that time, certain things were like kind of, by the time you got into Slayer and stuff, like certain bands like Judas Priest seemed a little old because they were a bit slower. But now you hear that stuff again, you kind of can go backwards, and I don't know. Then I just kind of went all over the map from like kind of Melvin's Butthole Surfers influence, kind of noise rock bands, to when started Jerk with a Bomb, which was just essentially a 4-track project, and like learning how to use a 4-track, and writing some acousticy songs. And then I don't know, maybe that thing of just wanting to, I guess, getting into songwriting more,
Yeah.
listening to 60s classics, Bob Dylan or whatever. And then that went on for a while, and then it was, I guess, like Black Mountain kind of morphed out of that, of like kind of wanting to play the riffs again, and and add the volume back in, and the fuzz. And when the first Black Mountain came out, like it wasn't until we like started touring and playing with bands like Comets on Fire and Oneida, that I was even like aware that there was like a modern psychedelic scene, because
Uh-huh.
the first Black Mountain was pretty much influenced by just, well, a lot of krautrock, and then bands like Faust and Can, Flower Traveling Band, of course. Like there was like all those. I guess that was the beginning of all the rockumentary DVDs started coming out, and there was like that Led Zeppelin box set of them playing like in '71. That was just like
Yeah.
mind blowing.
It was a
And then
game
I guess
changer.
at the same time, a lot of those records started, like was it like Three Men in Beards or whatever. Like a lot of reissue labels started reissuing all that like crazy early '70s like rock stuff. Because I remember like when me and my friends were like super into Slayer and Possessed or whatever, and there was a million bands around that sounded like that. So I remember we would be like, oh, that means that like when Sabbath was around, there was like must have been like thousands of bands like that. But at the time, it's like I never heard Sir Lord Baltimore, never heard Bang, never heard Flower Traveling Band. A lot of those records were like lost gems because some collectors had them and stuff, and you kind of had to have like a older friend in the know to hear a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then I mean, the psychedelic thing was really just, there was no plan to become a psychedelic band. It just, and even when that term first came up. Like I was kind of like, what do you mean, like the Grateful Dead or whatever? Like I don't know. I was like,
Yeah.
and I don't know, just finding different ways of trying to. I mean, I've always been someone that's always like searching for like new music, whether it's new or old, and like different. I go through like tons of different phases of, like I'll find like some new, scene, like maybe like the British psychedelic folk scene of like Fairport Convention and stuff, and then I'll kind of like dig super deep into that, and that'll lead back to like people like Shirley Collins from the late '50s, like these amazing singers and finger pickers, and yeah, it's just weird how, especially back then, like all the different scenes, everything was super regional. I mean, even when like thrash and that stuff came out, it was like the Bay Area had thrash, New York had the moshcore, England had grindcore,
Yeah.
Norwegian black metal and whatever. But it was kind of this regional thing of like probably just friends like inspiring each other. So there was a lot of regional sounds.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, endless music.
Yeah, well, and YouTube really allows you to delve deep into some of those more obscure bands, or even just in the internet in general. You mentioned the revelation of thinking, oh well, there must have been a couple other bands out there that sounded like Sabbath, but never got the critical acclaim or popularity. And then when you start to dig and Google search a little bit, eventually you track down these really obscure recordings. I did that not too long ago with new wave of British heavy metal bands, because
Oh yeah.
my friends and I were trying to figure out, we were arguing that Def Leppard was a new wave of British heavy metal band, even though those guys tend to
They
shun the
were.
term. That
Yes,
they try
yes.
and escape it as much as possible. So then I was like, well,
Yeah.
were there any other bands around that kind of sounded like Def Leppard that come out of that scene? And none really entirely like Def Leppard, but I mean, there certainly was a few of those, new wave of British heavy metal bands that had the glam sheen about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, that's another thing that I was thinking about Black Mountain too. Is there's a bit of that glam in there, like Mott the Hoople, or maybe even a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
Bowie influence in there too. I mean, I'm sure in your travels you've delved deep into
Yeah,
that kind of stuff too.
I
Eh?
love that stuff. I mean, I think I remember hearing like Ziggy Stardust like pretty early on in my life, and that was pretty amazing. And I love Mott the Hoople and like Steve Harley and the Cockney Rebel, and yeah, there's a lot of that stuff's really cool because it's kind of just came. I guess it came out of the pub rock scene out of England, and then it's got a little weirder and weirder and a little twisted. I recently went in. I was listening to the Bay City Rollers on Spotify.
Yeah,
So I wanted to revisit it, and it was actually like for a band that was like essentially like a teeny bopper pop group. They sound pretty raw nowadays compared to pop music nowadays. But there was it went for, if you go to the, what does it say, like you might also like,
yeah,
there was just like endless like kind of one hit like weird. I guess probably I think some of those bands they would just like put like the glam stamp on it. Same with like a lot of the later '60s stuff where they just imprint like the pop orchestra over the singer songwriter.
yeah,
But they put a little slap back on there. It sounds like T-Rex and
yeah, for sure. Well, listen, the record Destroyer coming out May 24th via Jaguar. So I mean, apart from the record release, obviously, I mean, what's on the horizon for Black Mountain? What do you got going?
we're playing in Toronto next week, and then we got a few other shows here and there, and then come the fall, we're gonna do some pretty major touring. I think the Prairies are planned in there, probably Europe.
Wow.
Hopefully hit like Mexico City and Australia and stuff again.
Yeah.
Hopefully some South America.
Well, it would be amazing if you guys came out to Saskatoon, because I live just a stone's throw away, and I would definitely, make the voyage for that, man. It would be nice to, meet you in person.
Yeah, I think I saw Amigos on the tentative list of that's in Saskatoon, isn't it?
Yep. Saskatoon is a huge untapped market for music. I think maybe people tend to think that Saskatchewan is country orientated, but Saskatoon is a great city for rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as like kind of working class town, and that I mean, I don't know if it is or not, but I don't know. A lot of those places always have great histories of rock and roll.
For sure. Well, listen, Stephen, it's been awesome chatting with you and all things Black Mountain, and of course the record is brilliant. Destroyer, May 24th on Jaguar. Thanks very much for your time, sir. Always a pleasure chatting with you about not only Black Mountain but just music in general, man. Thanks.
Right on, man. Take care.
Yep. Have a good night.